with your hosts, Stephen Edwards and Maureen Edwards.
Hey, Stephen.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. So good to have you back.
It's been a while.
I was thinking maybe we could talk about self-regulation with kids, with youth, children in general.
Sure, of course.
What is that? What is self-regulation?
I would define it as the ability to control your own emotions without the use of external bodies. So to give a little bit more context, we all feel a wide range of emotions, and some are positive, some are negative. And whatever those thoughts or feelings are, they affect us internally, and how they affect us internally affects how we act externally. So it's really important to be able to recognize how you're feeling in this moment, in the next moment, and to be able to understand what you're feeling and have strategies to calm yourself down, control your emotions, reason with yourself if you're feeling angry. And really, the goal is to subside any negative emotions and reach a homeostasis.
I'm thinking of, the toddler age, 2 to 3 or 3.5, where they're really, really kind of rambunctious and everything is no, and it's very challenging to get the child on board with what you want to do. They're kind of like rebellious, they're the opposite, and there's a lot of temper tantruming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that kind of behavior, or when you say self-regulation, are you talking about something different?
It's definitely an umbrella term, and that is something that would include, absolutely. So with that age group in particular that you mentioned, toddlers, preschoolers, between 1 and 4, 1 and 5, you see a lot of that behavior, absolutely. And I think a lot of that can be combated or regulated with structure, consistency, and positive reinforcement. Children need especially, they need structure and they need guidance because they're an open slate and they don't know what's going on in the world. They don't know what this person is thinking. They don't necessarily know why they're feeling certain emotions. They just know that they are feeling something. So it is the adult's job, the worker's job, whoever it is, the parent. It's their job to give them the structure and consistency and discipline that they need to understand what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and when they're feeling emotions that might lead to unacceptable behavior, what they can do as a positive alternative.
When you said they need structure, what does that mean? Like when I hear structure, I'm thinking, okay, they need like a routine kind of thing, but I'm not sure if that's what you mean, or is it more broad? How do you provide structure, and what is it?
Good question. Structure, it can look differently based on the child, and it's not necessarily routine. Routine helps create structure because they know what to expect at what times during the day, which is very important because when you know what's coming next, you're less anxious about it because it's not a surprise. So if there's always, if they know that after they have their breakfast, they're going to go outside, and then after they go outside, they're going to come in and they're going to play for a little bit and then have lunch. And then after lunch, they know nap is coming. That kind of routine is structure to their lives. And that structure allows them to have a little bit of a say almost in what's going on, because even though they're not necessarily choosing what is coming in what order, they know what to expect out of the day, and that allows them it really allows them to ease their anxiety about what's going on in their lives. Because as a child, you have so little say in what's going on. You might have a little bit of choice here and there, like what park we're going to go to, or do I want to, watch TV or go outside. They might have small little choices here and there, and that could deviate day to day. But what's important is just for them to know that after one thing, they're aware of the next thing. And structure is also an umbrella term. We talked a little bit about routine just now, but structure is also knowing what is acceptable and what isn't. And right now, I'm providing structure to the dog who doesn't know what is acceptable. He thinks it's acceptable for him to go into the cat's face and lick him. And it's my job to teach him that no, that's not acceptable. And how you do that approach will vary depending on the child. But what's important for them is to know what the expectations you have for them as the supervisor, as the parent, as the responsible person in the room. And they need to know how they can achieve what you're expecting of them. So it needs to be very clear and concise. And there can't be any room for inconsistency. Because if you're inconsistent with a rule, what that teaches them is that that rule does not matter. Because if Monday it's not okay for me to throw snow at somebody I don't know, and then Tuesday when I do it again, you don't say anything, well, on Wednesday I'm going to think, well, there's a good chance he's just not going to say anything, so let me try it. Because especially with young kids, there's a lot of experimenting, there's a lot of lack of impulse control. So they are just going to kind of do whatever they feel they want to do in that moment. And until they learn that that is going to get a negative reaction, negative reinforcement, they're going to continue to do that. So it's very important to be consistent with the rules, and that is providing structure.
It sort of brings to mind there's a lot of split families where the child is traveling from the one parent's house to the other parent's house. And I'm wondering, well, I mean, each house and each parent might be parenting very differently. They might have different routines. They might have different expectations, like all those things that you just said. So how does that affect the child? And like, what are your thoughts on that? Because it's a reality for probably over 50% of families out there.
Yeah. And it's a very good point that you brought up. And it affects the child in profound ways. Even I've seen very minuscule examples, such as John Doe does not eat blueberries with mom, but when dad serves blueberries, John Doe gobbles them all up. No issues. But if mom tries that at home, I don't want it. So why is it different for one parent to the other? And a lot of it has to do with the expectations. If mom doesn't expect John Doe to eat the blueberries and is like, okay, you don't want it, I'm going to take it away. Well, you just taught your child that actually I don't need to eat that food that you gave me if I don't want to, because they're just going to take it away after 5 minutes of me not eating it. Whereas maybe at dad's house, dad says, you're not leaving the table until you eat your food. Well, you set a very clear expectation, and if they don't follow it, they're not going to get a reward, which is leaving the table to go on to a new activity. So they set a very clear expectation, and if you don't follow it, you're being negatively enforced. Your behavior is going to be negatively reinforced. So you're not going to want to do that behavior anymore. Whereas if you eat all your food, you get a reward. You get to leave the table, you get to do a free activity. So even a slight little variation in how you approach something as simple as food gets a vastly different reaction from the child.
Right.
And that really goes for all aspects of their behavior. That's a very small example of food, but what if it's something a little bigger? Like when I got into a fight at school, mom said, "Did you hit him back, or did he hit you first?" Mom talks about what happened, and then after it's all done, she's like, "Okay, I don't care." Whereas you tell dad, and maybe he's on the other person's side. "How dare you hit that person? You're in trouble. You're grounded." Things like that are going to change your child's behavior. It might not stop the behavior, but it will certainly give them a different avenue of approaching how they're going to talk to mom and how they're going to talk to dad. Maybe they're not going to reveal all the information to dad because he'll get angry, whereas they know mom is going to have a conversation with them about it. So all these little deviations in how you approach conflict is going to change their behavior.
You know, that is extremely interesting, because the way my mind is working when you said that is like the child is sort of learning how to be different people or show a different face to one parent versus another parent based on the expectations.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And it all relates back to what expectations are there and what support is there to achieve those expectations. Because if you have expectations, but you don't provide any support to obtain them, then the opposite effect will likely happen, whereas they may stop trying to achieve the expectations because they view it as unachievable. So you might start to see you might be reinforcing negative behavior as opposed to what you think you're doing, reinforcing positive results.
Give me an example of doing that, because maybe parents don't even realize they're doing it.
Say I am working at school and, I'm trying my best. Only I know that though, right? Because I'm at school. Mom and dad aren't at school. And I do my best and my report card comes and I get a B. I have a split house. So I go home and I show mom, "I got a B, mom." "Oh, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. That's awesome. Next time, try for get a B plus," right? I'm super proud of you. If you can't do it, that's okay. But, let's work towards getting you even something better. You're providing that child with positive reinforcement, right? They feel good about the job that they did, but there's also a new goal, something to achieve. And maybe you could even throw in a little reward. If you can get that B plus, then, I'm going to buy you a game, or we'll go to the baseball game together, or watch a movie that you want to see, whatever it is. Okay, so you provided positive reinforcement, you provided expectations, so now they feel good about the job they did, but they're also ready to do better next time. You go over to dad's house later that week, and you say, "Here's my report card, Dad. I got a B." He says, "Wow, you couldn't have got an A?" Well, now you feel like shit about yourself, unfortunately, and you're probably not feeling like, "Oh, I really want to get an A next time." I'm probably thinking, I just don't want to show dad my report card anymore, because it doesn't matter what I do, he's going to feel like it's not enough. So just small little changes in how you address these situations are going to have a very real effect on the thoughts and emotions that go through the child's mind. These are all developing brains. And if you don't be very mindful of your words, and that's going to stick with them.
It's really highlighting how important it is for parents to be on board with the same message and the same expectations and the same structural environment for the kid.
It is. And I recognize how difficult that can be, especially if the parents aren't on good terms with each other. Even if they are on great terms and they have it all agreed, mom's with them Monday to Friday, dad takes them on the weekends, there's enough routine, there's expectations. They are working to do their best for the child, but they might see things differently on how to parent. And maybe that was part of why they split up. So mom might think this is the best way to go about this problem. Dad might think a whole different way is better. They might both be valid, but unless you can kind of figure out a way to make both of those ideas meet in the middle, to have a consistent environment for the child, you're doing them a disservice. And a lot of parents are accidentally doing this. And that's why you see a lot of behavior in children, whereas they'll go, even in, same households, they'll go and ask dad, oh, can I go to the park? No, of course you can't. And then they'll say, okay. And they'll walk upstairs and say, mom, can I go to the park? Sure, why not? Have fun. Okay, you've now taught that child that mom is the better person to ask for this. So I'm going to ask mom for this thing. I'm not going to ask dad for this thing. And that might change depending on what it is. But the child is adaptable and they learn what is going to get them what they want. And unless you're consistent on messaging, they're just going to abuse that.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is the child is being taught to manipulate. And I'm not saying manipulation in like either a good or a bad way, just the fact that they can maneuver between like different people or different circumstances, or present things in a way that will get them what they want, or maybe get them what they don't want. For example, if they go to dad, like you said, and present the report card and they get in trouble, or they get, why didn't you do better? They might not want that. So they can present in a way, or not present it to the dad at all, to not have that response.
Yeah, it's very true. Children are very adaptable.
They're smart.
They are smarter than, they're often given credit for. And they will change their behavior based on the response that they get. And that can show as manipulative, or it can show in, more positive ways, where if you're always giving them positive reinforcement and creating ways for them to achieve a new goal, they're going to work towards that goal. It really just depends on, are they getting what they want? That's important. But, they also need to understand that they're not always going to get what they want. And even if they don't, it's not necessarily a bad thing. They're not going to get in trouble even if they didn't, go up to par.
I like what you said about, giving them the positive reinforcement, and then, you're kind of making, you're suggesting, like, maybe we can do better and work towards the B+ kind of thing. And I'm wondering, is that something that, the parent can kind of help the child with? Or does the parent kind of leave the child to themselves to achieve this higher goal without like that input? Or is it both ways? Like, I don't know.
I think it depends on the child. Some of them will just need a little bit more hand-holding, a little bit more support. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just part of their personality. It's part of their developmental process. Whereas others might want to be like, okay, that's kind of what you want. Let me go off and do my own thing and see if I could do that myself. It really just depends on the child. And, in another podcast, we mentioned how there's so many tools in a chest and they're all valid, but you need to be aware of which one to use in which moment and which one is better for which child.
I'm thinking that might be very difficult for some parents, or maybe most parents, to know what to use.
Parenting is not easy. No one ever said it was, and you shouldn't expect it to be. But you need to be adaptable, and you need to understand when you're doing a disservice. And you could usually see it based on their behavior. And if you start to see, changes in their behavior that are negative or that you want to change, before you start yelling at them or looking at them as the problem, you need to look internally and you need to think, how can I do better? What can I change? What responsibility do I have to these behaviors, to these actions that I'm seeing? And if you're able to look internally, objectively, you know, it's not a fault on yourself, right? We all make mistakes and we all could do better. But if you're not giving yourself the room to do better, then you're just going to be, you know, hurting them in the long run.
Right. If a parent or parents, right, even if the couple is together, are having behavioral issues or self-regulation issues with their child, what's their best route for help?
You know, it depends on how early you're intervening. If you're doing it so late that the child is doing destructive behavior that's, you know, harming others or themselves or their environment, then you know, might need to seek professional help as soon as possible. And that could be, you know, something like maybe they're hurting themselves, or they're going to school and they're hurting other people, or they're setting fires in the house, right? There could be very extreme behavior that you might not feel capable of tackling on your own. And that's totally fine. That's why there's, you know, support systems out in the community that you can access. But for smaller scale problems, I think it's best to, as I said, look internally. How can you do better? Talk to your friends, talk to the people around you, and see what they're doing, see what they think works. And then talk to your child, because they're a big part of this equation too. And they're going to offer you insight if you're able to take it. That's very valuable, right? If you're willing to hear them without being judgmental, without making them feel like they don't have a voice, then you'd be surprised at the insight that they're willing to provide.
Yeah. I'm thinking that maybe for parents, there might be feelings of guilt or shame, like I didn't do a good job, or I'm not doing a good job, or I suck at parenting, or that kind of thing, which can sort of paint the whole getting help and how I, you know, receive the help and try to work out these things with the child.
Yeah, and that can manifest in parenting. It can also manifest in just day-to-day living for people that aren't parents, right? If you're going to beat down on yourself and you're not willing to give yourself the benefit of the doubt to do better, guess what? You're not going to do better. You need to believe that you could do better before you could do better. It's not, you're just not going to fall into a puddle randomly and you're a great parent. You know, if you're not doing a great job, that's fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine to recognize that you're not doing the best and work on how to do better. It just comes from being able to accept what the problem is and being objective in how you can fix it. If you're not willing to take responsibility for yourself or for your actions, then it's going to show in your life in a lot of different ways. And they're not going to be positive.
What do you think is the best way parents can reach out for help? Would you think it's like a parenting course, or talking to their family doctor or teacher, or somebody like you? How do parents reach out?
Well, you know, we live in a day and age where there's a lot of information out there. They can start by researching things online. They can go on YouTube. They can find videos. They can read articles, do their own research first. If that doesn't provide enough helpful tips, or it doesn't give you enough avenues on how to achieve these goals, then if your child's in school, talking to the teacher is a good idea. Talking to, you know, the child and youth worker at the school. There's a lot of them these days. That's always helpful. There's counseling. There's family counseling. There's a lot of services out there. Some of them are expensive, which is unfortunate. Some of them are free, which is nice. But you need to be able to do the research and figure out what's best for this situation, because the earlier you do it, the more beneficial it'll be, and the more positive results you'll see.
Yeah, that seems to be the take home message, is that the earlier the better.
Yeah, preventative is always better than reactive.
If you're seeing behavioral issues in your child, when is too early and when is too late? Like, what's the optimal age to kind of get some help?
I don't think there's a too late. I just think the longer you neglect the issue, the harder it gets. So earlier is always better, as we just said. If your child's 30 and they're having these issues, though, because you've neglected them for the last 29 years, then, you have a huge, huge uphill battle, and you're going to require every support system possible. But, if your child's 3-year-old and they're just throwing temper tantrums at school and they're hitting kids and throwing things, then you're in luck, because they have so much more development to go. And if you really start creating structure and providing guidance and expectations that are clear and routine, and giving them that positive reinforcement, and working with them on their strengths as opposed to their weaknesses, you can see a lot of positive results very quickly. And I've seen that a lot in my work, working with young children in particular, that they might start off at 2 years old and they have a lot of anger and they have a lot of behavioral problems. And maybe, you can't make it all go away in a year or even 2 years. But if you're consistent and you give them that positive reinforcement when they are doing a good job, and provide clear expectations for what is not acceptable, I guarantee that you will see results, and you can solve these problems.
Thank you, Stephen.
It's been great to see you. Thank you so much.